Parks and Rec, Urban Forestry. Our mission is to manage and ensure Portland's urban forest infrastructure for current and future generations. Many of you have participated with programs with us in the past, and we really love to see all of your smiling faces here again. And for those who haven't participated with us before, I'll just do a little bit of a brief overview of who we are as Urban Forestry. Our urban forest consists of over 220,000 street trees and 1.2 million park trees and an innumerable amount of private property trees. And Portland's Urban Forestry Department is involved in managing or regulating all of these trees to differing degrees, from fostering community tree awareness and stewardship to developing tree policies and programs, issuing permits for planting, pruning, and removal of public and private trees, as well as responding to tree emergencies and establishing young trees in parks. Today, as you guys, hopefully most of you know us already, today we have two moderators. We have Angie DeSalvo, our Outreach and Science Supervisor. She is right up there, smiling. And we have Maggie Finley from East Portland Community Center. She's a recreation leader who is joining us with Urban Forestry for a few months. And both of them will be in the chat box to answer any questions or to make sure which ones could be best answered at the end of the presentation. So they will be there to help you out and support you with anything that comes up through the chat box. So if you have questions, enter them in through the chat, which many of you have already introduced yourself in, and they will be there to help you out there. I will not be quite paying attention to the chat as we go through, so I apologize for that. Let's get started on introduction to pruning. I want to thank you guys for joining us in your individual homes and not coming into contact with each other. Although it would be great to see you in person, we hope to be able to see you this fall for all of our fall events, if that's where the world ends up. And if not, we hope to see you again soon after that. Today, we're going to be going on a journey into an introduction to young tree pruning. This workshop usually is a live demonstration and has a hands-on practice portion. So to change things up, we were going to have a 3-hour presentation, and I don't know if anybody has the ability to sit through a 3-hour webinar, but I certainly don't, and I don't expect any of you guys to either. So we just brought it down to 1 hour, really getting what you need to know so you can go home and, well, you are home, go outside and prune your trees. Today, I just want to let you guys know when we get started, pruning can create both good and bad results. The more you know and the more likely you are to have some good results. So what you can take from this here today will really help to increase the health and future of your trees. And I really hope that you guys come and join us in some future programs as well and get out there and prune your trees of Portland. So although forest trees, they grow quite well with only nature's pruning, landscape trees, the trees that we see in our urban forests, they require a higher level of care to maintain their structural integrity and health. So when you guys are here, many of you came for different reasons. So you guys, if you want to write in your answer box, I know Angie asked earlier, but if you have any specific reasons as to what brought you here today, why are you pruning? You need to have an objective as to what you're doing when you start. I mean, I could very much enjoy going to my parents' house and pruning every single tree on their property, but luckily they have many acres and I can just do that for fun. But pruning shouldn't be just a recreational activity. It's something that you're doing to really care for and maintain the tree. So why are you pruning today? Is it to increase safety? Is it to improve the structure of the tree? Are you here to reduce future maintenance costs? It's a lot cheaper to remove a 2-inch limb now than it is to have an arborist crew come out and use their bucket trucks to remove a much larger 10-inch limb in the future when it becomes a hazard. So learning what you need to do now to take care and prevent some of those future hazardous situations can really help to reduce those future costs as well. And the last one here we have is to maintain street and sidewalk clearance. So some of you may not know, but within the city of Portland, our tree code regulates how much clearance must be between the street and the sidewalk and where the lowest branches of the tree are to maintain street clearance and sidewalk clearance. I want you guys to take a look at this next picture and tell me if you were driving down this road going, say, what is it, 20 is plenty in Portland? So if you're going the speed limit in Portland and you are driving down this road, how many of you would see that stop sign really easily? Would it be really apparent to you guys? You guys think you would see that little tiny stop sign in there? No, it's not very easy to see. So we know that I did do some Photoshop work. So there was the little sign to let you know that there was a stop coming ahead, but they had to put that up because the trees that were planted there need to have their canopy raised in order to see the stop sign and increase the safety for both the pedestrians crossing the street and the drivers who are in the vehicles. So these trees, there's 2 trees here. You can see we have one stem here and we have one stem here. Both of these trees, they will need to have some of their canopy raised so that we can see and be safe while driving and while crossing the streets and while walking along the streets. And so in the city of Portland, our regulation says that anywhere over a sidewalk must be 7.5 feet between the sidewalk and the lowest branches over the sidewalk. And then on any residential street, it must be 11 feet between the sidewalk or between the street and the lowest branches. And on any main street or arterial roads, those are going to be 14 feet, because you really think about those trucks that are going to be driving down there. They're pretty large, and it is always an enjoyable day when our operations crew comes back and they're like, well, you know who won the battle between that truck and that tree? Sure was the tree, I bet. And a lot of trucks come into damage, and we want to prevent that for both the safety of the truck drivers and for the tree and for everybody involved. So maintaining those street clearances are really important. And so now, what trees can you prune? You need to have trees that you have permission to prune. So whether that be street trees, if you are the adjacent property owner, you are responsible for maintaining your trees in the city of Portland. And so you are able to prune those trees. You're also able to prune street trees through the Portland Pruners program. I know today we have many members from tree teams who have participated in that program in the past. And if any of you are interested, we can talk about that afterwards. And it's a great opportunity for you and your tree team to prune trees around your neighborhood and maintain your neighborhood really nicely. And then you're also able to do private property trees. So if you own the property, you're able to prune your private property tree. But with all of these types of trees, it's important that you only do trees that you can safely access the branches of. So whether you need to, if it's requiring you to stand on a ladder or do anything that seems unsafe, we don't want you to do that. Do not recommend it. And just really, if there's a better option, we'll help you to figure that out. So don't do any pruning of branches that you can't get to safely, and make sure that safety is the first option for you. It is important to note that with all of these options, you might need a permit. So if you're not sure if you do need a permit for this situation, you can always go online, and we have different guides on how to figure out if you do need a permit for that pruning. Street tree permits are able to be self-issued online from our website. The other ones, if you have questions, you can always email or call or figure out what you might need to move forward with your pruning. Let's take a few minutes. I want you guys to type into the chat box, what are the volunteers here missing? So they've come out, they're pruning a tree, and they're looking at it. But what are these volunteers missing from what we would want them to be doing out in the field right now? If I was driving down the street, I would hope I would not see these guys out here pruning like this. Oh, we've got one answer coming in from Hillary, thank you. And Susan. So we've got safety glasses, PPE, what else do folks think? Awesome. You guys got it. As those keep coming in, you guys want to keep typing a few answers that you might think of. These folks, they definitely are missing a lot of stuff. I think the most impressive part of this photo, regardless of whatever safety equipment they're missing, is the strength of those elastic waistbands to hold up an entire sheath and hand pruners. I'm very impressed. That is probably my favorite part of this photo, is right there, because I don't think I've ever worn elastic pants that could support that kind of weight on it. So I'm very impressed with her pants there. But we are missing PPE. So one of you just said PPE overall, and you got it right. So personal protective equipment. That's what we're looking for. So you can see these folks here, they've got their gloves on, hard hats. If you're working with any branches that are above your head, you really want to protect the noggin. Make sure you got a hard hat on. High-vis safety vests. If you're working along the right-of-way, if you're in the street, you want people to be able to see you. So you want to make sure you have that high-vis safety vest. If you don't have a high-vis safety vest, if you have anything that's very brightly colored, just so that you're very apparent, you want to make sure that people can see you as you're working along the street there. Make sure you have protective eyewear. That's one of my most, I always forget to wear my protective eyewear. Don't tell my boss, even though she's in the screen to my right now. But I get a lot, I always forget to wear my protective eyewear. And when you're sawing through those branches, it creates a lot of really fine sawdust that if the breeze just hits it right, it'll get right into your eye. And it really hurts, it scratches your cornea, and I have gone through many bottles of emergency eye wash because of it. And I don't recommend it. So make sure you have your protective eyewear. I believe regular glasses can be approved as safety glasses sometimes, but if not, regular safety glasses will work. And then to remember to wear closed-toed shoes, because you are working with heavy tools, you are working with trees and branches and all sorts of stuff out in nature. You want to make sure that you're protecting your toes as well, because nothing can hurt more than a drop pruner on a toe, and can definitely cause a lot of injuries to you as well. So making sure that you're being safe, protecting yourself, and protecting the area around you to make sure that you are safe while pruning trees is incredibly important moving forward. So we know what trees you can prune. We know how to get a permit if you need one. We know what safety stuff you have to have, but we want to go over what tools will you need. How will you actually do the pruning that you're going out to do? So there's a few different tools that we really focus on here. You have hand pruners, loppers, hand saws, pole pruners, and pole saws. They all have a different job, and they all have that specific job for a reason and perform that job well. Following the rules of each of what their job is will really help you to make proper cuts and do a really good job of not damaging the tree and having any trouble making those cuts. So if you find that you're using a tool and it doesn't seem to cut easily, if it snags, if the branch doesn't come off nicely or it twists, you're having difficulty, you're probably using the wrong tool. So you might want to reevaluate what tool you're using and switch to one that might be better suited for that situation. So let's go over a couple different types of hand pruners. Your hand pruners are going to be used for branches and twigs up to ½ inch in diameter. So those are going to be smaller ones that you can really just get with a smaller blade. And so the three types that we have, the main one that you'll see most arborists and other people using for pruning trees, and is my personal favorite, is going to be the bypass pruner. It's a general all-around kind of hand pruner that you'll use to make clean cuts. It has a curved blade and a scissor-like action. So only one side is going to be making that cut and it comes down past it. The anvil style of hand pruners has a very specific job where it's going to be used for cutting dead wood. So it's going to have kind of that crushing factor like a knife on a chopping board, and it'll just remove that dead wood so that you can make a nice clean cut there. The ratchet style is going to be really useful for those who might have a little bit of a weaker hand strength, or it needs to have a little bit more support or ergonomic action on that. And so the way that that one works is that the ratchet style, it will go, you'll squeeze it and it stops and allows you to readjust in mid-cut so that you can use that multiple times and use multiple cuts to make, or multiple hand strength cuts to make that cut through. You don't need to have the same amount of hand strength that you would have for a bypass or an anvil pruner, but it is much more similar to the anvil than to the bypass style. So those are the three types of hand pruners. Right here you can see, like I was talking about, right here we have an anvil style, and so that's going to be crushing through the dead wood there so that we can cleanly remove that. And then on the right here we have a bypass pruner. You can see that he has the blade against the trunk to make a nice clean cut, and so he's just going to take that blade, come right past the lower bar, and it'll make a nice cut on the tree there for the removal. For loppers, we also come in the three types as well. So we have bypass right there. We have our anvil here, and we have a ratchet here. So those are going to be used for branches up to 2 inches in diameter. They're much longer blades, they're much longer handles. They're larger blades and they're longer handles, and that can really help you for increased range and comfort. So if you need to get some of those root suckers that we'll talk about in a bit, those are really useful for being able to reach down and get those without having to bend too far over and hurt your body. So using good body mechanics is really important as well. So not only using your personal protective equipment and making safe access to branches, but also making sure that you are not bending or stretching or making any wrong movements that can injure yourself. So I really like loppers for kind of getting that clearing effect for the suckers before going back and really fine tuning those cuts. They can also be used up for branches up to 2 inches in diameter, and they're really great for leverage. So you have a much longer fulcrum for where the cut is going to be made than you would with a bypass or with a pruner you would. So we have loppers, we have hand pruners, and then the other one that's the main one is going to be our hand saws. And so there's kind of two types of hand saws. We have our fixed blades and we have our folding hand saws. Folding saws are really nice. They have a smaller blade, usually about an 8-inch or so, and they're used for cuts up to, that was my fault, sorry, used for cuts up to 2 inches in diameter. So they're going to be a little bit of those smaller ones, but you want to have a nice fine tool sometimes. And they have small teeth for small branches. So very small, nice, slow, clean cuts, and really good for doing those smaller removals. The fixed handles, those are going to be ones that have longer blades. They have a much larger ability to cut tree diameter of branches. So those can be over your 2 inches diameter or greater. Your straight blade is going to be good for that green sapwood, so the younger kind of wood, and the curved blade is going to be good for heavy duty cutting. So they each have their own role, but the curved blade is going to be much more general use than the straight blade will be, because the curved blade will be good for those larger removals if you have to do them, but the straight blade is good for kind of that young wood and large teeth for large branches as well. So we've got our tools. And then when you do go to use them, it's important to make sure that when you use these tools, whether they're the hand saws, the loppers, or the hand pruners, you know how to use your tools. So we know what the tool's purpose is, when we're going to use them, but knowing that we have the ability to use those tools properly is really important. As you can see with each of these hand pruners, they have a way that the hand grip is designed for you to hold appropriately. If you have any questions, you can usually find out from the manufacturer's website or other folks online how to properly hold it. Or once we are able to have an actual in-person workshop, we'll be able to help you guys with learning how to properly use your tools. So that's something that we are usually able to cover nicely in our in-person classes, and is difficult to do through the online. But I will say that with the hand saws, it's important to know you're not trying to saw down a tree like this is 1860 and we're here for Stumptown trying to cut down all the Doug firs and clear this place out. We're not doing that sawing back and forth action. We're going to be doing a cut where you go down and you cut on the blade down. And then when you go up, it's just going to be to move the blade up again. You're not cutting on the up, you're only cutting on the down. So you're using your muscles to pull the blade down and make that cut. Going up is just to keep it clean and go up again for the next cut. And that's the way that the hand saws are designed. And so it won't be effective if you try to go back and forth like that motion. It'll just really tire you out easily, and it won't get the nice clean cut efficiently, and it will be a lot more cumbersome for you. So we have all the tools we need to make those cuts. We have our PPE, and we're ready to actually start pruning. So the two main types of cuts that we're going to look at are going to be a removal cut and a reduction cut. When we choose a limb or branch to be removed, we want to take the branch back to the trunk or parent branch. Just so you guys know, those as we go through some of this, a little bit of a language is going to get more specific or complex, and so you guys do have that handout with the vocabulary on it. If you need any references, it's there. So we do talk about what a parent branch is on that page. So back to the, take the branch back to the trunk or the parent branch just outside of what's called the branch collar. Removal cuts, so the one on the top here, that's going to be what is our preferred cut. We like to bring those back to the main stem because it's able to seal off the wound and callus over appropriately. The reduction cut, although it is needed at many times, it doesn't have as beneficial of a way of healing. It's not as effective at healing, and so it's a little bit longer for the tree to seal that wound off and take time to recover from that. So both are very common cuts, but we do try to prefer removal cuts most of all. And so where I was talking about with making that cut is going to be the branch bark collar. And so, or the branch collar, I'm sorry. And so right here we can see where the dotted red lines are on both of these images. You have a dead branch on the left that you would be removing, so you'd want to make that right outside of the branch collar there, where you can already see it's starting to callus over. And on live wood, you're going to go right outside on right outside of the branch collar here. It's not always easy to find your branch collar. Sometimes you have to look for this, what's called the branch bark ridge, which can sometimes look like a frown. So when you're looking for that, you can find where the tree, the trunk from, or the bark from both the parent stem and from the branch that you're going to be removing, they're kind of growing together and they start to create this wrinkled formed effect. And so right there, that's going to be the branch bark ridge. And we're going to make our cut right outside of that if we can't find the branch collar. So I want you guys to take a look at this right here and make some decisions on where you think you're going to be making those cuts. So this one's a pretty easy and pretty visually acceptable way to, or one picture to find the branch collar on. So I hope you guys can find it. Take a few moments. And it's going to form just outside of the, where the parent branch is attached, or the attachment is to the parent branch. So as you guys can see, we've got all these different wrinkles coming right off of the trunk here. So that's our branch collar. And then right outside, we're going to make our cut right here. You can see the frown from the branch bark ridge that formed right here. And so it's very, very apparent on this tree. Not all trees are going to be that easy to see. They can be very, very hard to find. So sometimes you're just going to have to confidently or unconfidently make that cut a little bit outside of the branch collar or the branch bark ridge there where you think it might be. Not all trees are going to grow the same, and they're not going to be as clear cut to be able to see those when you're going through them. When we're actually doing these cuts, if you were to be taking that large of a limb off, it can be kind of difficult and it's a lot of weight to be removing from the tree. And what we're really worried about is damaging that branch collar. So inside of this branch collar here is where all the tissue is that's going to form the callus and seal off that wound. Sometimes you can see that donut shape on trees as they're starting to seal over a couple of years. That's what we really want to see there. And if you damage where those cells are, it can take longer and have a harder time to seal off that wound. To prevent having any damage to the branch collar, other than us just cutting into it, we want to do what's called the 3-cut method. And so that's when you're using a handsaw or a straight or a fixed saw. So you want to use your saws to do this. This would not be for a lopper or for a hand pruner. You're going to first make your cut under the branch right here. So number A, you want to make a small undercut. We're just going to be scoring the bark of the branch so that it doesn't tear when we take the weight off the limb. Our second is going to be this one right here. So your first cut will be a couple inches, maybe a few inches outside of that branch collar. Your second one just has to be a little bit outside of that. It's not a perfect mathematical equation where you're going to make those cuts. It just has to be outside of it where you're comfortable doing that. And so then your second cut letter B, is going to be removing that limb. So maybe you need to work with a buddy in order to support the weight of that limb, but make your cut starting from the top and going down. That way, if you start from the bottom and going up, the branch's weight will push against your saw blade and not let you go into the branch any further, and you'll get stuck, and that's very problematic. So in order to prevent that, you want to start from the top and go down. And so we're going to just cleanly cut that entire limb off and remove all of the weight and have a friend with us if we need to pull that away. Our final cut is going to be just nicely cleanly removing the stub from that branch removal. So we've got A cut, we've got the B cut, and we've had the weight removed, and all we have left is this little stub right here. We're gonna find where that branch collar is right in here, and we're gonna go right outside of it and make our final cut. So making that cut there will allow the callus tissue to be able to form the seal around the wound and really help the tree to survive and thrive for the future, so it doesn't become any kind of wound for infection or open for any kind of pests or pathogens. And so the 3-cut method, it's really important to practice that and to be really good at that. You'll find it's very popular. We talk about it a lot. And it's important because it prevents situations like this. So what I was talking about with the bark tearing, you can see if the limb falls, it pulls all of that down with it. This was a street tree, and you can see it tore a whole lot where the branch started up here and went all the way down. And so that's a much, much larger wound than you would have started with if you had been able to remove that branch at the collar without damaging any of the trunk bark tissue. So we can see a lot more damage. This one here will also take a long time to seal off that wound, but we really want to prevent that, and the way to prevent that is just by doing the 3-cut method. It's very simple and very easy, and it should be on your handout. I believe I put it on there. And so really just to prevent the bark from tearing, make sure you do that 3-cut method. So now you guys have all of the ways that you can make your cuts. You have the tools, everything, we're ready to go. We haven't actually started pruning. So you've sat here with me for a good 20 minutes without even starting to prune, so I appreciate that. And the way that we're gonna do this today is we're actually gonna virtually prune a tree right here. So looking at how we can do pruning a tree live without being in person or being able to do that, it's a little bit difficult sometimes, I found, to do live trees pruning because you can't always see all around the tree, and if it has leaves on it, it's also difficult to see what cuts are being made. And so we're just gonna go through this really simply to kind of go over what are those goals of tree pruning? What are you here to do? What do you want to accomplish? Why are you pruning trees? You know that you need to prune the tree and you know that you want to, but where do you start and how do you get started is the most overwhelming task most people say when they come to ask us how to prune. So getting started, we'll go from number 1 through number 6, and we'll just run down through these to show you where those cuts are going to be made. So the first one we're going to focus on is going to be removing any dead or damaged branches. So here you can see this branch over here, it was broken, whether that be from maybe it was just a wind damage, maybe it was a storm damage, maybe some passerby had hit it, maybe a car, who knows. Lots of damage comes to your tree, so if it's broken, if it's damaged or anything like that, you can remove that first. The next one we're going to go to is going to be removing root suckers or adventitious growth from the trunk. So you see all these little ones, you kept them a lot on trees out in the street trees, you'll see them. It really interrupts a lot of the visual clearance for both drivers and pedestrians. So removing a lot of those root suckers is very important. They're also not that great for the trees. So even though they do have leaves and they are providing nutrients and such to the tree for storage and for growth, they're still taking a lot of that growth as well, which is not going into the larger canopy, which we would like to see, and instead is going into growing and expanding the branches that are coming from the adventitious growth at the root plate, root collar. And so we want to remove any of those suckers that are down there. That was where I said it was really nice to use the loppers, so you're not bending over and hurting your back quite as much. It's really handy to use the loppers to kind of remove and clear a lot of that out so you can get in and see what you're working with, because it's not just usually one root sucker, it's usually a few of them. Our next step is going to be focusing on a single leader and removing any branches that are going to competing with it. So on this tree, I selected that I want to follow for a leader going all the way up to here. You want to have a good central leader so that the tree can have a nice main form to grow tall and straight and not have anybody trying to compete with it. When you have competing leaders or co-dominant leaders, that can cause a lot of damage in the future when one of them might fail from included bark, and then they're a lot older, they're heavier, and it can cause a lot more costly damage to your property or to the surrounding area. So we want to really make sure that we have a good, strong central leader and that there's no competitors to it. So I picked this one. You could have picked another one here. So this one was actually higher up, but I thought that I felt like this one had a little bit more of a better, looked stronger to me. So I know it's just a graphic, so it's not really a strong tree, but within that, I kind of chose this one can go and this one can go. And this one's gonna be my main stem because I like where it is relative to other branches. It's very central and it just feels like it'll be a good, strong leader for the future, the health of the tree. So I took those two branches out. Our next one is going to be removing the lowest temporary branches to raise the canopy for visibility and clearance. So we were talking before about making sure you can have that visibility for where the street clearance and sidewalk clearance is. That's when you're going to take your fourth step and start removing some of those lower branches. We'll talk about this in our advanced pruning classes next month, but the lower branches on your tree are not necessarily going to be there in the mature age of the tree, depending on how large that tree will get at maturity. Most of our trees that are going to get a little bit larger out there, as they're young, those lower branches are temporary and will not be there for the future. So if we do need to remove them as the tree gets mature, we can safely take those and know that they will not be needed for the future, and we're fine removing those. So we want to take the canopy up, raise it up a bit, and make sure that there's good visibility and clearance for people who are passing by, whether they're pedestrians or vehicles or whatnot. Bike riders. Why have I forgotten bike riders? This is Portland. So now we've taken those branches off, and our last two steps that are really going to be those final two that you go through. Your fifth one's going to be removing any bad branch attachments or rubbing branches. I actually, even though this one here was removed as part of the lower clearance, I really didn't like its attachment because it kind of goes around the back of the tree. You don't want things that are going to be crossing or curving. You want to make sure that your branches are coming nicely out at a 45-degree angle from the trunk. And anything that kind of goes a little bit too wonky, you can remove if it's going to be growing back into the tree. So this tree in the future could have the trunk start to grow into the branch there and have some included bark, which is not good for the tree. And so by removing that now, we can prevent that for the future and whatever damage might come to the main trunk in the future. Here we have a couple of attachments that I want to remove as well. So we have some that are going straight up and down. We want to kind of remove any that are going to be like that because they're not having that strong 45-degree angle branch attachment. They're not going to be able to support their own weight really well, and it's not going to be the best choice for a branch to be attached to. So whether that is maybe there's something that we call water sprouts, so that's a reaction to a lot of pruning cuts or other stress on the trees where those branches are going to be coming very finely up, straight up and down. You might see them a lot on some of those fruiting trees like pears or cherries. And so those ones are going to be ones that have bad attachments that you're going to want to remove as well. And so those are the ones that we see kind of going up and down. There's a few others that I wanted to remove in here. So identifying permanent branches and removing temporary ones. We talked about that a little bit with the removing the lowest temporary ones, but there are a few more in there that we can pull out. We want to maybe get a little bit of a thinner canopy, get some wind flow through there, maybe just to be able to have some separation between those scaffolding branches. And so we were able to remove that there. And so right here, this is where we end with our tree. We did step 1 through 6 and took everything off that we wanted to, and here's what we have left. That's a huge difference going from this tree to that tree. That's a lot to remove from it. And so it's important to note that in the city of Portland, urban forestry, we recommend pruning no more than 25% of our live canopy. And so that live canopy does not include the dead or damaged branches. So 25% includes all of this orange. Do you guys think that the orange, does that look like 25% of the tree canopy or more than 25% of the canopy? Any responses on our chat box? More, yes, that's a heck of a lot more than 25%. So even though we do have the goals of tree pruning, it's not a checklist for you to complete in its entirety each time you prune. You can follow the goals as a guide to use as you approach tree pruning. And if you can only remove the root suckers and identify a central leader before you reach that 25%, that's okay, because you want to make sure that the tree has enough live living canopy to produce the energy it needs to come foliate next year and to seal off those wounds. So if it means you have to come back in a couple of years, 2-3 years, that's okay. You can come back and you can always remove those branches. It's not going to outgrow you that fast that you're gonna have to chase the tree down and all of its branches, but focusing on those first few priorities and then working down towards the other ones as you have more of that pruning allowance to work with is really helpful in not causing too much stress or damage on the tree. You want your tree to really come and recover from that. So as we talked about at the beginning, where pruning can end up good or bad. It can end up pretty bad if you don't follow a lot of this information here today. And if you do over prune, it can end up pretty bad. If you make some poor cuts and it's not able to heal, it can also end up pretty bad. But if we follow that 25%, we don't do more. We start with our checklist from 1 through 6. We can have a really good opportunity to have a successful pruning and a successful sealing of that tree. So now I want you guys to do a little bit of the work. So make sure you got your chat box open. Yep, wait until next year. And so in the chat box, we're gonna prune a couple trees in a moment. So right now you can see this couple here, they had worked on this tree. We started with we knew that we could only do the 25% live canopy. They started with those root suckers and really cleaned it out. We needed to get a lot of that street clearance there. You can see it was very, very difficult to see the houses even behind it. You can't quite even see that pedestrian crossing sign from over here. It's a little covered up. So these folks, they went in, they removed the root suckers and adventitious growth, and they removed as much of the upper canopy as they were able to, following that goal of tree pruning checklist, or tree pruning list. I'm sorry, it's not a checklist, I said that. So following that list, you're going to be kind of going through. And so they weren't able to get everything that they might have wanted. They might not have been able to do some of the stuff, and they definitely weren't able to get to some of the upper canopy, but they were able to get to the lower stuff, and they were able to remove those suckers, and they mulched it, and it looks really nice now. But here's a pop quiz for you guys if you have your chat box open. What species of tree is this, and why is that special? If you can see, it's a little bit hard of the image to see, but if you know your tree ID really, really well, you can tell from like the form and from the bark. We got a few guesses on here. Anybody else? Not a maple, I like that. I do enjoy ruling out things. It's not a maple. It's also, what else is it not? It's not a dogwood. It's also not a conifer. But it looks like most of you guys are getting this. So, see, not a birch. Thank you. I think it's not. And so it is an elm tree. Do you guys know why that might be important though, based on where we are and what is happening in the city of Portland? Ah, excellent. So you guys know, yes, we do have Dutch elm disease here. And so in the city of Portland, there is an elm pruning moratorium from April 15th to October 15th. So that means that no elm tree in the city of Portland, whether on private property or in the right of way, can be pruned between those months. And so that's really important to remember when you do go out. You can't prune those trees right now. You have to wait until after the elm pruning moratorium is over to be able to do that. So it does look like they were out there in fall based on the color of things around, and they were following the rules nicely. Now it's your turn, guys. We're going to start with this lovely tree. Excuse me. So I want you guys to kind of write into the chat box. Sorry, take a sip of water. What do you guys think would be some of the few things that we'd be able to get through, and where do you think we would be able to stop? So how much do you think we could do? So if we were to start with the very first one, let's look at, are there root suckers on it? There actually aren't any root suckers on this, so we can start without that one, but we can't quite see if there's any broken or damaged branches. But what do you guys think are some of the other things that we can start removing from that tree? Yep, we've got Laura said some adventitious growth. Another Laura also said pick central leader, as did Susan. We've got some lower limb removals. The large branch over the street, that one can be taken back. It also looks like it might be competing with what leader we have there. Anybody else? That's a few things. So yeah, we would probably go in. I'd probably take a good, would you want to do it before it leaves out for better visibility? That's a good question, but we will get to that at the end. Sorry, I should not be reading this chat box's questions. I can't even follow my own rules, guys. You should know that. I'm sorry. And so I would start probably with those adventitious growth. If we don't have any dead or damaged branches, there might be a little twig on here. You do want to be able to have the leaves on the tree so that you can see what is dead and what's not dead. So sometimes it's hard to tell when you do prune trees in the winter. There are certain trees that you do are recommended to be pruned only in the winter time. And so those few are specific to that, but otherwise I do enjoy being able to actually see what's living and what's dead when you go to approach the tree, because the very first thing that you're able to do is remove those dead branches. So if you're looking at a tree, it's winter time, you can't see any foliation on the tree, any leaves on the canopy, and you're looking at it, you might not know what's dead or what's alive without skinning the bark a little bit, which can also cause some damage. So it's kind of nice to be able to know what's living and what's not before we get started. And so I would probably, this looks like a lot of like just little grass or weeds popping up. Looking at what we have here, we have some adventitious growth. We have little sprouts here. Specifically to the tree, ginkgos do have a lot of those like attachments of leaves popping right off of the trunk. So that can be a little bit confusing to folks sometimes, but they're not, you don't have to remove every single leaf like that. They are perfectly fine on that tree. But I do agree taking a couple of these back and then focusing on the central leader and not taking too much, because it is a small tree. We don't want to have that much removed. It's probably only a few years past planting, so it's ready for that first move or first prune, and we'll just do a little bit of care for it right now. Good job, guys. Let's see the next one we've got here. Okay, so we've got 3 trees here. What do you guys think about these ones now? How do they look, and where would you start with them? Someone said we could start with the dead limbs. Remove lower branch angling to sidewalk. Anybody else? Pick a leader. Minimizing the crossing and rubbing branches. Yes, so as you guys can see, there's a lot of growth coming out of this tree here, and it is a little bit specific to that species, but there's a lot of dieback going on. So this is a little bit of a tricky question where you see this and you think, oh, there's a lot of dead branches, I want to remove a lot of this. But as we do, we want to be really careful because there's not a lot of leaves on this already. The tree doesn't have a lot of green that can actually produce energy and put it into storage. So we might not even want to prune this tree right now. We might want to just take a couple of things that we know are really, really dead, but then let it kind of clean it up a little bit, but not really do too much pruning, because I don't want to take that much while this tree is very stressed. It's having a little bit of a difficult time. There's a lot of dieback. There's not a lot of leaves on it, and it needs to be able to get some energy growing and put that into the healthy growth. So we can clean it up and remove some of the dead that's unsightly, and if it is fully dead, but otherwise I really wouldn't actually remove any branches from this tree, and I really wouldn't focus on the central leader yet. So I would want to kind of let that tree hopefully recover a little bit, maybe give it some extra care, make sure it gets good watering and some mulching in the springtime, and just really pamper those trees until they're good and strong and healthy enough to take that pruning. So we want to make sure that they're able and resilient to seal that wound and to have enough energy in its storage and its roots to be able to do that. And this tree, I don't feel comfortable or confident that it's ready to do that this time. So sometimes you have to take the choice to actually pass on pruning a tree. But you guys, those were all really great suggestions, and those were following the goals of tree pruning. So you did follow along right. And I thank you guys for that. Okay, how about this guy? Let's get some. Okay, we've got two answers. Is this one a tricky one for you guys? Got any other thoughts on where to get started? It is a little bit difficult, but that's why we put it in here, because if I gave you guys the easy ones, we would get through this immediately and it wouldn't really teach you guys much. But I want to see some of the confusing questions that are going to be a little bit difficult, so that when you do go outside and you go to prune, you can get a little bit of a better idea for how to make those difficult decisions and how much of the canopy you're willing to take off at a time. So let's see, we've got, somebody said start reducing the second leader. Another says lower branch, check limb over street. Angie says we should wait. And somebody says the lower limb is too big to remove. Is it too big to remove? So let's talk about that. So right away, this is a young tree. It's taking a little bit while to, it's got a little bit of a separation here, and we really don't like that branch there. So like everybody said, we really don't like that lower branch, but what are we going to do about it? And so, oh, your answer was for another question. Sorry. Thank you, Angie. Good. And so what I would look at here, I really like the person who answered that we were going to start reducing the branch. So we do think right away, we're like, oh, that's got to get out of there. Is it too late? Is it too big? It's not too big just yet, but we don't want to let it get too much further. So right now, we might want to, if we don't have any of the other stuff going on, we really don't have much for root suckers or adventitious growth, and it's a young enough tree that we don't really want to worry too much about the other stuff yet. We really want to focus on that one main issue that we're seeing here, is that one right there. So like, what was it, Laura said, we want to start to reduce that second branch. So this one here is going to look like the main strong stem, and let's get rid of this guy here. So when we take this, he might be more than 25% of that canopy on its own. So we might not want to take all of it at once. If we take part of it and reduce it a bit back, we can kind of, we can take some of that canopy away and redirect some of that growth into the rest of the tree. And then maybe in a subsequent, maybe in 2 years, we can come back and remove that branch entirely. That way we can have a nice clean cut and not have any worries about a competing leader in the future. But if you don't know that you're going to come back to that tree, sometimes people like to do that removal at once and just get it done because they don't know if anybody's going to come and care for that tree. But making the safer choice to kind of take that branch back a little bit and then let it go and then remove it further in the future years is a lot safer of a choice for the health of the tree. You can always take back more of a branch. You can always reduce it further, but you can't reattach a branch once it's been removed. Okay, how about this guy? He's our final one to kind of look through. And so I want you guys to kind of see there's a lot more canopy. It's a little bit bigger than the last 3 trees we looked at. So how would you approach this one? We've got some lower branches, street and sidewalk clearance. Yep, so most of what we're looking at is from folks are seeing those sidewalk and street clearance issues. So making sure that we can get rid of those. Yep, I do like that. Getting rid of some of the branches pointing down and clearance. Try to take some of the weight off the co-dominant stem. Somebody has a good pair of eyes in here. So I can see, yep, it looks like there's a couple different things coming up through here. One thing that I do like to notice is that, can any of you identify what tree we have here? Yep. And so something that I like to identify about this, so this is this is an ash tree. Ash trees, you can always see they have this like curving up of the branches. And it's one of my favorite parts to look for in the springtime is that new growth of the ash as it starts to like reach up like a candelabra almost. I think it's kind of cool. And just a little trait that I've always learned to look for ashes. But that also can cause a little bit of problems in its own because it has that curving effect. It has that wobbly kind of growth to it. And sometimes they can have that straight upright attachments and other difficult branch attachments or crossing of branches. And so looking at, I like a lot of the things that you guys suggested, looking at removing for clearance, trying to take some of that up, making sure that passengers or pedestrians and vehicles can pass by easily, and then taking a little bit of the weight off. So this one might be one where we can start looking at those bad branch attachments, and then any kind of lower branches that can be removed, any temporary branches that we're ready to start taking up. Because this tree, we don't see that it has those root suckers. It doesn't have some of the other stuff, and we can't quite see reach the leader with our tools from the ground. So we can focus on some of those other aspects of the goals of tree pruning. So seeing those different trees in different stages, different where you're going to start on your checklist, whether it's going to be from the beginning, whether it's going to go towards the end. That really depends on what the size of the tree, how it's been cared for, and what its needs are. So kind of looking at your tree and assessing that each time and knowing what the priorities are is really important going forward with your tree pruning. And so to review kind of what we've gone over before we go into some of those questions, I just want to go over what we went over here today. So know your reason for pruning. Is it to increase safety, improve structure, maintain street and sidewalk clearance? You can always check online and see if you do think that you might require a permit, and you can always find out if you do happen to be in some of those special areas that do require those private property permits for pruning. Only prune the trees where you can safely access those branches, making sure that your safety is the priority here. So wearing your PPE, only accessing branches that you can safely get to, making sure that those are all the best choices to keep yourself protected during the pruning process. Making sure that you use the right tool for the job. Be sure that you're comfortable with your tools and how to use them appropriately. Making pruning cuts just outside of that branch collar. So maybe take a walk this afternoon, and as you walk through the streets, look at some of the trees along the sidewalk and see if you can find their branch collars. Even if you don't have to remove the branches, you can still just go out and kind of like get yourself familiar with it, identify them, see if you can point them out, be like, that's the branch collar and that's the branch bark ridge, and see how they look on different tree species as you walk through the neighborhood. And so making sure that you do know where that is important, because you don't want to damage the branch collar, because that's where all that callus tissue is that will seal off the wound you make. So it's important to keep that part safe and secure to seal off that wound and be healthy for the tree. And remember to follow the goals of tree pruning, but no more than 25% of that live canopy. Always prune within your comfort zone. So don't ever do anything you're not comfortable with, and only do what you are comfortable with. And if you have any questions, or you don't feel like you're ready to or you're not really sure if you're ready to do that, you can always take a picture and send it to us, and we would be more than happy to kind of help you out and give you some guidance along the way. To kind of just to wrap up a little bit before we hit the questions, I want to thank you guys. The recording of this will be shared in our tree bark newsletter that should be coming out for the second part this month. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us at ufvolunteers@portlandoregon.gov. And then we have a bunch of upcoming events with urban forestry. So we know that you guys are all kind of looking for what can we do during this time period. It's getting nice and warm out. We want to be able to get some learning and engage with our urban forest. And although we can't meet in person, we're still going to be offering some other workshops like this one here today. And we also have our pop-up arboreta starting up this month. So for the next few months, we've got a bunch of pop-up arboreta throughout the city. If you want to check those out online, see if there's one near you, and then visit it. And then we also have a couple different events that you can sign up for on our website that are in the next 2 to 3 months. So those are there. And then we can start going through the questions in a minute. Let's see. Okay. Angie and Maggie, would you guys like to unmute yourself so we can kind of go through some of the questions that you found to be ones that would be beneficial for the group? Oh, wait, are you able to unmute yourself, or do I have to do that? I have to do that. Okay.
Haha.
Thanks, Claire. That was great. Folks, I tried to respond to many of the questions that came in. So maybe take a minute and write your questions in now for Claire. And Claire, do you want us to just point questions at you?
Sure.
You want to give a few minutes for them to kind of roll in?
Yeah, you guys want to start kind of bringing some of those, and let's see what's last.
Yeah, I think you could certainly answer Cooper's. What is the best time to prune? Time of year?
Yep, so it really is dependent also on the species and when you're going to be doing stuff. So a lot of people really recommend going for that, those early spring to some of the winter months, and then some of those like spring to summer months, because you really want to focus on what tree you have when there's flowers out. Whether it's a fruiting tree or not is really important. Fruit trees take on a whole different aspect than what we're talking about here today. And so you don't want to do it kind of when it's that later season, when the tree's starting to go dormant. You don't want to do it while the tree is starting to produce fruit or any of that. You want to do it earlier in that springtime, and when you can see when the tree is actually foliated to know what's live tissue and what's not live tissue. And then, as we said, the elm has to be done in the winter, during the months between October 15th and April 15th. And I believe a lot of oaks are recommended to do in the winter time as well, due to some pathogens that can spread through them.
Claire, we had a question about why don't we remove more than 25% of the canopy? How is the tree going to respond if you take out too much?
So if you take out too much, it's going to really respond as it's being stressed out. So we know that trees, they become stressed for a lot of different reasons. We talk a lot about drought stress, when we don't have enough water to the tree and how it reacts to that. And so when we do take more than 25%, we're starting to get into that area of causing a lot of stress on that tree, where it's going to take the energy stores and start to put that towards sealing those wounds. And it's going to start to put out more of that adventitious growth, because it needs to be able to produce more energy. And so it's taking the opportunity to put out some undesirable branching that we don't want to have. It takes a lot longer to seal those wounds off, and it can really lead to decline of health of the tree. So there's a bunch of different factors that add into that, but we really want to just focus on not overwhelming the tree with too much damage to it at once. It's very similar to like when we go into difficult health as humans. So if you have too many things compounded on you, it can become really difficult. So adding one difficult disease over another after another can become very, very hard on our bodies, and there's only so much we can take, and the same works for trees. There's only so much damage that they can handle, and keeping it to below 25% is really the guidance that we give to the public and to arborists to make sure that we're in a safe zone, we're in a safe place, and we won't really hurt the tree moving forward. Because we want pruning to be beneficial. We don't want it to be more harmful than good. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it at all.
Great answer. Thanks, Claire. Can you talk a little bit about what included bark is?
Ooh,
and
yeah.
Why that might not be so good?
Yes. So included bark, I do know that I touched on that, and I did not put it into your vocab, so I apologize. Thank you, whoever did ask that. So included bark is going to be where you have your tree or a branch, they're growing together, and then let's see if we can find a good image on here, rather than me trying to visually demonstrate to you guys. Okay, so let's look at this one right here. So see how we can see there's like that V and it's coming together. Something that we like to talk about with branch unions, which is a whole nother word that I haven't talked about either, but where those branches are together, if it has a V, that's usually a bad thing. If it has a U, it's usually okay. So the V is going to be representative of when we have included bark. So that's going to be that you have these two stems coming out, and so they each have their own piece of bark on the inside, and as they start to mature and grow larger, put on more girth, they start to grow together, and so there's that bark in the middle. And having the bark in the middle isn't good, because the wood won't be together, and it causes that area for more decay, more damage, and it can cause separation. So as we see these two here, that V, if these were to grow much larger, say in about 10 years, these each are about 5 inches, they're going to be fused together, and you might not even be able to tell that there was a division there, but there's still that remaining included bark, which is going to be a wound with inside of the tree and can still be harmful for the future. So we want to get that out in a way. It can also be a spot where having those V's, you can have like a lot of water accumulate in there, a lot of other material, and just really lead to a lot of like rot and decay of that spot there. So removing those is really useful, and preventing that from becoming much, much larger where it might be over your head or over your car or house. And having that kind of included bark, that's where you really want to prevent that, because once you have that in that situation and it's a much larger limb, that's where you're going to have a failure of the branch attachment, and it will drop and it will really cause a lot of damage. So preventing that when it's young, making sure you don't have any included bark in that area there is very, very important.
Great.
Someone else was asking, oh, go ahead, Angie.
No, go ahead, Maggie.
Someone else was asking, how important is it to sanitize your tools in between trees?
Yes, that is very, very important. So making sure that you clean your tools between trees. We don't want to have, when you go to the dentist, you hope that the person before you have their tools been sterilized since then. I don't want somebody digging around in my mouth when those tools have been somebody else's mouth that I don't even know. So when you think about that, trees aren't too dissimilar. There are pathogens and different pests and stuff that you can carry from one tree to another. And so it's important to disinfect those tools between them. So there's a lot of very specific species of trees that will carry things and that can spread to other species of trees. So sanitizing your tools is really great for just keeping a clean environment and knowing that you are cutting into this tree where you're exposing the wood and where all of the interior functions of that tree exist. So where it's able to transport its water, its food, everything that's living in that tree, you're exposing that with the blade that has also touched other trees. So sanitizing those is really, really important to prevent transmission of pests and pathogens.
Great. Yeah, well, even if we know that we're working on a tree that may have a disease, we'll even sanitize between branches if needed, just to prevent any spread. Great. Any other questions from you, Maggie? I have one or two more.
There were a couple in here that I think we already touched on. Someone else is asking specifically about timing for pruning maples.
And do you have any answer for that, Angie? I would mostly just say following the regular format.
Yeah, you know, there's so many different thoughts on this. I think one of the common responses you're going to get is prune anytime the tools are sharp. And we do often tell people that because what we find is that most trees can generally handle pruning. And if you're only going to do it like when you're in the mindset to go and do it, if your option is to like do it right then or just wait till next year, go ahead and prune it. But with maples, if you can avoid when the sap first starts flowing and they're coming out of dormancy, that's probably best. But otherwise, they can tolerate it most of the time year round. Claire, I know we're reaching the end of the hour, but I might ask, do you have any advice for folks as they begin this journey? Any little things any advice you would give to someone who's doing this for the first time?
I would say just to really be confident in yourself, because I think that's like the biggest barrier that I find when I work with volunteers the first time they go out to prune trees. They just really don't feel confident in making that first cut. And so maybe that requires you to just have another person with you. I think that pruning can be a really great social activity if you have somebody that's in your physical distancing group. And so if you have somebody with you just to kind of talk through, like, do I want to make that choice? Am I really ready to make that choice? Should I take that entire branch back? Should I just reduce it? Really having that conversation, I think, is one of the best ways to get started with pruning. Even if both of you are starting with not the greatest knowledge, at least kind of talking back and forth really helps to make that decision and to be like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to commit to making this removal. We're going to take this branch off. And so I think that working through that is really, really important, and finding the confidence in yourself to make those cuts. So you're not gonna really mess up the tree. It's not gonna die right away. You're gonna be okay. I promise. Just make the cut, do it cleanly, and do it properly.
And then come back and see what happens the next year. See how it's growing and responding.
And send us a picture.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep. If any of you guys do head out and prune some trees after this, I would love to see some before and after photos. We would happily share them with our tree bark and on our website and such, and be able to show what great work you guys are doing out there. I also want to mention, I know that there was a lot of questions in the beginning about fruit trees. We do offer a fruit tree pruning workshop. It is designed to be in person, so we'll see what happens when August comes around, if we're in person or not. But we do offer it in mid-August and mid-January. So Different fruit trees require different time of year pruning, so depending on what tree you have, you might want to check that out, and then we can see if you would be appropriate to go to the August or January one, or both of them for fun. We like the August one's really great too, because a lot of our fruit comes into fruiting then, and it's ready to be picked, so our plums are very abundant at that time. It's a lot of fun to prune our orchard, so if you guys have questions about fruit trees, I really recommend coming to that workshop.
Awesome. And what can folks look forward to learning in part 2 in advanced pruning?
Yep. So advanced pruning, that's going to be on June 3rd. That's a Thursday, I believe. And so that one, we're going to look more in depth at like focusing on the what, the why, the how, and the biology behind it. So really taking that deeper step into why are we making that cut? Why don't we want to do this cut? And kind of getting those really in-depth questions that you might have from today, and looking at how do trees grow and form, and how does that affect the choices we make while we're pruning. So the deeper,
awesome.
I get real jazzed up about it because it's all into like cell biology and all that fun stuff that I love.
Yeah.
And I have references to pastries on there, so it is a fun time.
I hope everyone can join us.
Yep. So you guys can expect I will be sending out an email following up. There will be a ask for you guys to fill out a quick evaluation. If you guys can submit that, it's completely anonymous. And then we will get all the other information to you guys on tree bark with the recording and whatnot. If you guys have any other follow-up questions, feel free to email me at ufvolunteers@portlandoregon.gov.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks,
Maggie.
for joining us this morning. It was great to see you.